All right, good evening. Good to see everybody out tonight. It's kind of nice. It's nice and bright, sunshine. I don't know if it'll still be like that when we close out. I probably won't, but it's kind of nice driving over here and getting a little bit of daylight before things go. Hope everybody's recovered from their daylight savings time Saturday night. But it's good to see everyone. I sent out the test last week. I don't know if you didn't get that. I sent it to everybody that responded via email, as well as everybody that I got from our registrar. Okay, so if you didn't get it and you need it, please let me know. I'll be happy to send it out. All right. I'll tell you what. Before we begin, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the day. Lord, we are so blessed to be your children. We are thankful, Lord, for your watch care over us. We're thankful for the gift of your Son, Jesus. We're thankful for his sacrifice. We're thankful for the life that we have within him, both in this life and the life to come. We ask, Lord, your blessings on those who are traveling or who are away from us. We ask that you keep them safe, especially if they're coming here tonight, Lord. We ask that you be with the sick that we know of. We're grateful for David's recovery from his surgery. And we pray, Lord, that you continue to bless him with good health. Thank you, Lord, for all that you do for us. And it's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. All right, chapter 27. You had plenty of time to look at it, to write this down. But we're going to talk about it. Let's look at this. This is a major turning point in the narrative, isn't it? Big turning point. Let's go ahead and look at this. When Isaac was old, his eyes were dim. He could not see. So this is Isaac. He's getting up there in age. He calls Esau his older son. Esau was the son that who? That Isaac what? Esau was the son that Isaac what? Loved. All right. And Jacob was the son that Rebekah loved. So you had this conflict. There was certainly a conflict between the two of them. And then you had probably conflict between mom and dad over the conflict between the two sons. I don't know if anybody's ever had that problem in their household where you got two kids there. One of them is this, one of them is this, and then you got butting heads. And then inevitably mom and dad kind of get dragged into it as well. I like the fact that God does not shy away from showing his people warts and all, does he? He makes it very clear in the narrative, which is unlike most, because in most places, these people are held up as paragons of virtue, and they don't do anything wrong. But in the Bible, God's people are shown, look, these people do foolish things. They reap the consequences of those things. And it's all with the idea of instructing the people that are coming after them that are reading it. I don't know how many people have read this and said, maybe I shouldn't show favoritism towards my children. Hopefully people have done that. I don't know. But he says, he calls Esau his older son, the one that he loved, and said to him, my son, he said, here I am. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the day of my death. This is a man who is very comfortable the fact that he's not got much longer for this in this life. I do not know the day of my death. Now do this. Take your weapon, your quiver, and your bow. Go out into the field. Hunt game for me. That's one of the reasons that Isaac loved him, because he was a man of the field. He would bring in wild game. He would go and hunt. He would bring in this food, and he would prepare it. Prepare for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat. My soul may bless you before I die. All right, here's the thing. So Esau's hearing this, and he hears his father saying, I want you to go and do this thing so that I may bless you before I die. Now remember, he had already sold his birthright, hadn't he? He had already sold that thing that belonged to him. Even though he was just barely the first one out of the womb, he was still the oldest one. It didn't really matter. All right, he had that birthright. He had sold that birthright, and that was as good as in law. He had given it up, and it no longer belonged to him. All right, but he had given up the birthright, but he still had the blessing. And I'm thinking this is something that Esau is banking on. It's like, well, I don't have the birthright anymore, but my father will still bless me, and his God, Jehovah God, will do to me as my father blesses me with. Okay, so he's looking for Isaac to give him this great blessing, and we see the blessing that Isaac had intended for Esau. It was instead given to Isaac, instead given to Jacob. So he's thinking, hey, I still have the blessing. All right, don't have the birthright, but I still have the blessing. And he was Isaac's favorite, so he still holds out some hope for this. So what happens? Rebekah was listening. So when Esau went into the field, what did she do? Brings her son in and say, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau. He says, bring me game and prepare for me delicious food that I may eat it and bless you before the Lord before I die. Now, listen to me and do what I say. So who was spearheading this effort to deceive Isaac? At the end of the day, who was spearheading this effort? It was Rebekah, right? We don't know if Jacob would have thought of this on his own, if he would have ever intended this. He certainly took the advantage of Esau when he had come in starving to death, so to speak. We don't know if he would have done that, but what does he do? He has an opportunity to not do this, but what does he do? He listens to his mom, all right? He says, this is what you do. Go to the flock, bring me 2 good young goats. I can prepare this food for your father, such as he loves. You will bring it to your father to eat, and he will bless you before he dies. Well, you've got somebody that's already negotiated for a man's birthright. It's not out of the realm of possibility or even probability. We see here that Jacob says, hey, that sounds like a great idea, right? Sounds like a fantastic idea. Remember, what is he? He's a deceiver. That's what that. I mean, it's in his name. He's a deceiver. So, so we know here that Jacob's taking this seriously. He says, behold, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be mocking him and bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. So he's buying into this, and he's starting asking pertinent questions. Well, if we do this, we got to be careful about how we do it, because if we just simply do that, I mean, that's thinking ahead. I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that. He said, Esau's this big, hairy, red man, and I'm not, and Dad's going to know the difference. Even though he can't see, he's going to know the difference. All right? She said, his mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son. That doesn't work that way. The curse is the curse. Only obey my voice, go and bring them to me. All right. What was God's part in Rebekah's deception of her husband? Now, not that God caused her to do these things. He certainly didn't. God does not tempt men to sin. What was God's part in this deception that Rebekah tries to perpetrate on her husband? Remember at the very beginning, she's got the twins in her womb. They're wrestling with one another. Something is said to her. What was said to her?
The older would serve the younger.
The older would serve the younger. 2 nations are in your womb, and they're duking it out, so to speak. And one is going to be this way, one is going to be this way, and the older will serve the younger. So how long has Rebekah been holding on to this and thinking about all this, and how much did this inform her decision to try to do what she's about to do? Now think about this. She's not merely helping her son out. She's not merely trying to achieve something for her son that he wouldn't have otherwise. She's actively involved in the deception of her own husband. This is appalling behavior. Would God's words have been any less true had Esau received that blessing rather than Jacob? Would God's plan still have come to fruition if Isaac had laid his hands on Esau and given him the blessing that he intended? Yes. Absolutely. Would God still have made? Would the line have still come through Jacob rather than Esau? Absolutely. Again, this is the idea that yes, sir.
But you know what? I still struggle with this, because to say that God is okay with Rebekah lying, to say that the scheming and all that, God knew what he wanted. Mm-hmm. Remember, his ways are not our ways. And it has a lot to do with us today. He tells us what he wants us to do. But in the overall scheme of things, he's the one that's in charge. He's the one that's going to be obeyed one way or another.
Certainly.
Old argument that I've heard for years and years, if Jesus really had a choice. Well, Scripture teaches that he did it out of his own free will.
Yes.
But it was still according to God's plan. And so,
go ahead.
The way I look at it is that I don't look at it like Rebekah really lied and did things to contradict what God wanted. She just fulfilled it, and she had the right to do that as a mother.
That brings me actually to my second statement. What part of that, again, what was God's part in this? God simply said what he said. It did not command Rebekah to do certain things. She did those things out of her own heart and out of her own mindset. And at the end of the day, was God simply conveying a truth that was true regardless of the actions of any other person that was involved in this affair? Absolutely. He's merely saying, this is what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what Isaac does. It doesn't matter what Jacob and Esau do. My will is going to be accomplished. This is what's going to happen. The older is going to serve the younger. And it's going to happen. You notice that it doesn't even happen in the lifetime of Jacob and Esau. This is something that's going to happen farther down into the future. It's not, Esau never served Jacob, right? But his descendants did. So this means that even this thing that God gives to her, this prophecy that God gives to her, is not accomplished even in their lifetimes. As a matter of fact, when Jacob comes back to Esau, who's the one that comes forward, bows down, then goes a little bit further, bows down again, goes a little bit further, and bows down again? Who's the one that has to show humility for his actions? It wasn't Esau. It was Jacob. Jacob understood that Esau had every right to be as angry as he could possibly be. And he goes, as he comes to him, he shows humility and contrition for what he's done. So this idea about the older serving the younger, this is something that is accomplished in generations to come, not at this particular point. So you're right. The idea is that God's will is going to be done regardless of what we do. Regardless of what we do, God's will is going to be done. So let's continue this. Let's go on. All right. She says, so go do this thing. I'm telling you to go do this thing. You don't worry about it. Let the consequences fall on me. I love how it's easy to say something like that, but at the end of the day, who did the consequences fall on? They didn't fall on Rebekah. They fell on Jacob and Esau. They're the ones that suffer because of the issues. All right. So what did he do? He goes and he takes the goats. He brings to his mother. She prepares delicious food. Then she took the best garments of Esau. Okay. Let's go ahead and do this. Rebekah takes the best garments of Esau, her older son, who were there in the house, put them on Jacob, and the skins of the young goats she put on his hands and the smooth part of his neck. And she puts the delicious food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. At this point, Jacob is fully participatory in this deception. He's hungry. He's in it to win it, right? He's fully involved. And let's go a little bit further on. So he goes and she takes his food and he goes into his father. And he said, my father. And he said, here I am. Who are you, my son? Now here's one more chance. One more chance to not do this. He says, I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you said. Verse 20, but Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found so quickly, my son? Because the Lord your God granted me success. So he lies again. He says, please come near that I may feel you, my son, to know whether you're really my son Esau or not. You think at this point, Isaac maybe have a little nagging doubt in the back of his mind that something's going on. He can't quite put his finger on it, but there's something up. Maybe it's the tone of Jacob's voice. It doesn't exactly sound like Esau. It could be one of the reasons he gave him the clothing to wear is because he would smell like Esau. Esau's a man of the field. He goes out. He's sweaty. He has this smell about him. So she puts his clothes on him. So his senses, some of his senses are betraying him. Some of them are telling him something that doesn't quite ring true. But what does he do? He feels him, which leads us to believe Esau he wasn't just a hairy man. This guy was like an animal. Because he feels this goat skin, this goat hair on the back of his neck, and he says, yep, that's Esau. He's thinking, man, this guy was like a Sasquatch. But anyway, there he is. He says, so part of his senses are saying, yes, this is who I think it is. But part of him is like, I'm not quite sure. So come near to me, that I may feel. Jacob goes near and he feels him. He says, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him. Look at verse 24. Are you really my son Esau? He says, I am. So how many times did Jacob lie to his father in the service of receiving this blessing that was not his intended? Wasn't intended for him. All right? So this is, and we mentioned this, I have to put it on this slide. Did Jacob need Isaac's blessing to receive the promise from God? No. God's prophecy said that this was going to happen. Jacob was in this line to receive these certain blessings that were going to happen regardless. In fact, God blesses him in spite of the fact that he lied to his father, in spite of the fact that his deception in service of getting this blessing. He still did it. He still did it. Because why? He promised that he would. He said that he was going to do this. Okay? So the question is, was this all really necessary anyway? No. Jacob or Esau could have received all of the things that Isaac had intended for him, and it would not have changed the fact that Jacob was still the son through which all of this was going to come. God had rejected from the very beginning Esau being that son of the promise, that the one that the covenant would eventually come through. All right. So Jacob's this misplaced blessing, and he gives him this blessing. Look what he says. He said, "Come here and kiss me, my son." So he came near and he kissed him. Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, and he blessed him. Look at this blessing. "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed." It's a very beautiful blessing. "May God give you all of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you." So Isaac's blessing on Esau was essentially the exact opposite, or was essentially the blessing that God had said to Rebekah was going to come down on Isaac. Or, I'm sorry, on Jacob. I'm trying to get all these names together. Okay? I know I'm going to get this. Isaac's blessing on Esau was essentially the same one that God said, told Rebekah was going to happen for Jacob. Okay? So you have these two promises, one going this way and one going this way. One came from God, which superseded everything else. That was the one that was going to be accomplished regardless of what Esau ended up with. So it didn't matter. But instead, and in spite of all that, he still wanted this blessing. "Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." It's interesting, though, that the blessing that Isaac bestows upon Jacob mistakenly does end up coming true. But it's not simply because Isaac blesses him. It's because God had this in mind for him to be blessed in this way. God has something in mind that Jacob doesn't even understand just yet. It's going to be made very abundantly clear, hopefully by the end of class tonight. All right? So as soon as he finishes blessing Jacob had gone out, he'd left, and then all of a sudden Esau comes in. All right? I'm trying to think of us. I don't even know if you could adequately express how sad this particular thing is, how sad this occasion is. The despair in Esau's voice and in what he says is palpable. You feel badly for him until you realize that this is a man who really despised everything that was supposed to come to him, and you know he wasn't the person he was supposed to be. Look what he says. He says, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." And you can imagine when Isaac hears this, all of a sudden all those little antennae, all those little warning signs that were going off when he was in that room with Jacob, now all of a sudden all the warning signs go off. He says, his father Isaac, verse 32, "Who are you?" He says, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau." You can imagine this old man who can't see, having a hard time hearing, he's having difficulties understanding who's who. This just he must be in panic mode at this point. What's happened? What's going on? He says, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me and ate it all before you came, and I've blessed him? Yes, and he shall be blessed." You can't take back the blessing. The blessing's there. It's been poured out. As soon as Esau hears the words of his father, he cries out with an exceeding great and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me, even me also, O my father." He says, "Your brother came deceitfully, and he has taken away your blessing." Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me these 2 times. He took away my birthright." Not entirely accurate, is it? Not entirely accurate. What did Esau do with his birthright? He even says he despised it, because what did he do? He sold it. What did he sell it for? Yeah, long life, prosperity, a great relationship with God? No, what did he sell it for? A bowl of soup. High price for a bowl of soup, isn't it? He says, he's taken away my birthright, and now he's taken away my blessing. Now that's accurate. Esau was entitled to that blessing, and he didn't get it because of what his mother and his brother did. He says, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" And at this point, Isaac's basically blessed Jacob with all of the good things of life, all the physical possessions, the relationship with God, all of these great things. And Esau's like, "What do I get? What do I get now?" he's got my birthright now, he's got my blessing, I don't have anything anymore. But look what he does. His father comes back with something very interesting. Look what he says in verse 39. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, Behold, away from the fatness of earth shall your dwelling be. The idea here is, when it says, Behold, away from, the idea here is, Behold, of the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be. And away from, and of the dew of heaven on high. So the translation here is not quite that accurate. He's not saying that you don't have anything. He says, as a matter of fact, you will have all of these things. But look what he says, By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. This will not come easy for you. You're going to it's going to be more difficult for you because I've given your brother preeminence. He says, By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother, but when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. Now what are we thinking of here when he says this? What does he say this? 2 Samuel chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. All right? David conquers the Edomites. Who are the Edomites? The descendants of Esau. All right? He's basically the founder of the nation of Edom. So David conquers the Edomites in 2 Samuel chapter 8. But in 2 Kings chapter 8 and verse 20, the Edomites throw the yoke off of their necks from the kingdom of Israel. Right? So yes, at some point, the kingdom of Edom, Esau's ancestors, are going to serve his brothers, which is the nation of Israel. But eventually, he's going to throw off that yoke, and he's going to be they're going to be independent again. All right. So he says, "This is what's going to happen." All right. Now, what happened? Where would we be if something like this happened to us? We would say, "Well, it is what it is." I don't know anybody that's going to be that forgiving. What does it say, Esau, in verse 41? Esau what? Hated. And we're going to look at that word hated, and there's two different ideas in that word hated. This is not merely the idea that he liked Jacob less than everybody else. This is the idea of he hated Jacob. He hated him. And look what he says. The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. All right, so now this is a man who has purposed murder in his mind. This is murder of forethought. So he's planning on killing him. As soon as his father dies and the days of mourning are over, he is going to kill his brother Jacob. But look at this. All right, so does God have a part in this? I think so. The words of Esau were told to Rebekah. She goes and she calls Jacob. She says, your brother Esau comforts himself about you by planning to kill you. So he's not going to do anything to you now, but as soon as your father is gone and that protection is lifted, then he's going to try to kill you. So this is what you're going to do. Obey my voice. That's what she said about going and getting the goats, isn't it? Obey my voice. Just do what I tell you to do. If nothing else, Rebekah is a shrewd woman. This is a woman that she has a plan in her mind. She knows exactly what to do, and let's be honest, everything she's done so far has panned out pretty good. All right, she's good at planning things, she's good at executing them, so this is what you're going to do. Obey my voice. This is what you're going to do. You're going to rise and you're going to go to Laban. Where's Laban living? Where? Haran. Stay with him a little while until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you've done to him. Is that likely going to happen? No. Now, the anger and the fury may subside. All right? Well, I'll take that back. The anger may not subside. The fury may not subside. The desire to kill may subside. A lot of times something's planned in haste, and then a little bit of time goes by, and the burning desire to really hurt somebody kind of goes away. But there's still going to be anger, and there's going to be bitterness, and there's going to be a little bit of resentment. The good thing is God does not have in mind for Esau to labor in poverty. Okay, he's going to bless Esau. But that's not going to mean a whole lot to a man who's just had all of these things happen to him. So right now he's thinking, hey, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to kill that guy. I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to kill him. So stay with him a while until your brother's fury turns away and he forgets what you've done. I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereft of you both in one day? All All right, so that kind of, I'm not a real big fan of that last verse there. I'm not sure it's probably placed in just the right spot. But what do we get from this? What do we get from this? What's our lesson? Because we always got something to learn, right? What's our lesson from this this terrible scenario that we've just been presented with? What's our lesson? There's probably a couple. Anybody?
Don't have favorite children.
What's that?
Don't have favorite children.
Good idea. Don't have favorites. 100%.
I said try not to have a twin. Yeah.
Do your best. Do your best to avoid twins. Yeah. Yeah.
You talking about the whole story in general?
The whole narrative of the blessing and the deception and all of this stuff up to this very point.
Preached a sermon not too long ago, but don't sell your birthright.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah. And we as Christians shouldn't do that.
Do we often sell it?
We trade it for things that are
Oh.
pitiful in comparison.
I try to think about what this was a physical thing. It had an emotional part of it, but this is a physical thing. This birthright was a blessing of physicality rather than emotion, rather than a spirituality. But the idea is the same. It's the idea of the birthright. We have a birthright as Christians, don't we? We have a birthright. It comes to us when we become children of God. It belongs to us. And how many times have you seen someone sell their birthright for less than a mess of pottage? I always like that term. It's not found in the ESV, but I think it's King James. The idea of a mess of pottage. This idea of a bowl of soup that we sell for less. I had a guy, and I'll give you this just a little something. I had a guy that I worked with for a long time, and this was back in the days when I was working slinging paint, right when I was in college. And every summer I'd come home and I'd work with this guy, and we would paint this. There's this older fellow that used to work with us, and he was a drunk, and you give him a paycheck and it was gone in 2 days. And he was a sad, angry man, and I felt bad for him. I had a lot of sympathy for him. But then I realized that this is a guy that despised everything good and decent. He just did not care for it. And he would say something like, we would talk about, just in passing, just talking with each other around the water cooler, we would talk about, this happened, and we would share something good that happened for us. And he would just get so angry that something good happened for somebody other than him, because he didn't know how to run his own life. And I remember more than one occasion he said, he'd just be angry, and then he'd say, I'd sell my soul for $100. And I would think to him, and I would say, Tom, you don't mean that. And he did. He meant it. If he could physically sell his soul, he would sell his soul for $100, because that was his mindset. Yeah.
Can I throw another possibility here? We talked about, you asked the question, what does it possibly have to do with us today?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think about Acts chapter 17, where the Lord said that there was a time in the past where he looked in ignorance to what people did. But it doesn't take away from the fact that a couple of things occurred. Esau despised his birthrights, and then he wanted to kill, which is just as bad, if not worse, than what the attitude that Cain had in his heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about how in the past we couldn't figure out, because of ignorance, they couldn't figure out right from wrong many times. David showed that, and plenty of other patriarchs and others.
Right.
But for us, there is no excuse. We know that we should not have our hearts that way.
Right.
I don't know how many of us have a problem with our birthrights and being born as twins, but there's so many other things that we encounter in life that we should strive to have the kind of heart that Jesus demands that we have. To me, that's what I think the gist of all this might conclude.
Sure. I think that's a perfectly reasonable understanding of the scripture. It's interesting that in every successive age, at this point we're reading about the patriarchal age, and we don't read much about the idea of law. What does law have to do with it? And we do know that God had certain things in mind for even His people, even back then under the days of the patriarchs. He required certain things of them. But then we read where that segues into the nation of Israel, and God codifies the Mosaic law. What does that do? It gives them a better understanding, not a perfect understanding, but a better understanding of who He is and His nature. Okay? He says, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do this because that is going to make you holy as I'm holy. That's why I'm getting you to do this. But the great thing about it is, that was a law that was for those people, but then what happens? God says, I'm taking away, it's not going to be patriarchal, it's not going to be Mosaic. I'm removing that law because that law was imperfect. It was good for the time, but it's imperfect. I'm going to usher in a perfect law. It's the law of Christ. So we go from this patriarchal age where there was a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding. There wasn't a clear vision of God's law. They were certainly there, and it was given for them to do, but it was imperfect in all of its exercise. So he says, I'm going to take you from this in ages of ignorance. I'm going to bring you to an understanding of the law. I'm going to give you the law. You're going to abide by that. But when that's done, that's imperfect. It's going to be done away with. And now we live, as you said, we live under the perfect law. And we've been given, the great thing is we've been given everything that we need to understand and know about the law to abide by the law. Don't let people think, well, the law of Christ is very confusing. No, it's not. Well, there's some stuff that we don't know. No, we know everything that we need to know. Everything that we need in order to be pleasing to God has been delivered to us once and for all. All we have to do is go along with it and understand it and incorporate it into our lives, wrap our lives around it, and we're going to be just fine. But you're right, that back then this was just ignorance. These people were acting in ways that kind of baffle us. We think, why would you do something like that? Well, they're acting on ignorance. They're acting on foolishness. We got to be careful that we don't do the same thing today. Yeah.
Did you?
Good, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I've learned from this, I said, and maybe it's generalizing, but I said basically no matter what, God is always working to His glory no matter how things appear. Stay the course, stay close to God, trust in His ways. And then I said, well, what is God's glory? How is He glorified? And I just said through us, through His promises and stuff. But
I think you're on the right track, because at the end of the day, we look at this and we're looking at it again. We're looking at it in a snippet, aren't we? We say, look at this abhorrent behavior. Look at this repellent behavior. Look at these terrible things these people are doing to one another. But all of this is one snippet of a snapshot that's huge. It's like you have this big picture of or you look at one thing and you look, oh, that's kind of this blurry green, I can't tell what it is, and as you pan out, all of a sudden you see what we rightfully call the big picture. This little thing that we thought didn't make any sense, has no bearing on anything, it's actually part of this beautiful landscape of the landscape that we got out here. But if we focus on this, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We got to look at the bigger thing. At the end of the day, is God's purpose accomplished?
yeah, I mean,
Is God's purpose accomplished?
yeah. One of the things I have a picture of is it's basically the sun,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of the planets.
Right.
And there's an arrow pointing to the Earth,
Yeah.
which you can barely see.
Yes, this tiny little.
And I just, again, God's creation and who are we in
Yeah.
the picture. And yet God created all this for us.
Yeah.
Because He loved us so much. I think there's so much perspective in it.
It's tough to have. It is difficult oftentimes when we look at these things. It is difficult sometimes to have perspective. And if you think we're having a problem with it, you mentioned the people that were living at the time.
Right.
I mean, Esau's looking, what happened? What's going on?
Right.
And the great thing is we have the beauty of 2020 hindsight. We look back and go, that was foolishness. At the time, it made perfect sense. But we understand. At the end of the day, God's will is going to be accomplished. And the thing about it is God's will is going to be accomplished. We need to make sure that we're part of that, not acting in opposition to it.
Right.
I think that's the important thing.
You mentioned, I
Yeah.
just want to ask a quick
Sure.
question about Isaac's promise, his blessing,
Mm-hmm.
that once it was done, it cannot be taken back. So, I mean, and you mentioned law as well. So, I mean, there's precedence with law, and if somebody does something under false pretenses
Mhm.
or false witness and stuff, that can all be erased, and you can have a new trial.
Sure.
So why doesn't this play into, like, oh wait, okay,
I get-
you're obviously not Esau.
I understand.
So this blessing, I'm sorry, I'm forgiven.
It would be, rather than, we can't read anything into this, we see nothing in regards to God being responsible for that. It would be a societal type of issue.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I can't see where God, the blessing that Isaac gives to either Jacob or Esau would have been something that's for him to do. Do we read later on that it's accomplished? Yes. So was God in this? Yes. But did God give the blessing to give to them? No, that's something that Isaac did specifically. And it would be sort of you don't take things back. And you may put something else out there that changes things, but you can't say, well, I'm taking back your blessing. It would just be something that just wasn't done. I mean, for lack of any other better words, it's just not something that's not something we do. Type of situation. You had something you wanted to ask?
I'm not a big fan of a marriage that's like this, where
No.
where it's interesting even that so in verse 21 of chapter 25, Isaac prays on behalf of his wife because she's childless.
Mm-hmm.
She gets pregnant, has the baby's jostle, and then she gets this. The Lord's makes her this promise.
Mm-hmm.
She never shares that with Isaac.
I don't know.
We don't know.
Don't
we
know.
don't know. But it doesn't appear that she does.
It could be like Mary, she treasured up those things in her heart, so that's something she shared. It could be something that it was like, I don't even know if this actually happened. I'm not going to tell people, God came to me. They may think I'm insane. So it's something she heard, she listened, she treasured it up, and then as things happen, she starts realizing, oh, I was told that was going to happen. Oh, that's what he meant by that, so forth and so on. Again, that's what we said at the very beginning, right? We read about these accounts, and we realize that God says, look, I'm not hiding anything. These are my people, but you see how they behave.
Well, and you've said before, too, that all these different things, the way that the different people screw things up, God continues to show mercy.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, if God was not a merciful God, he would have kept Jacob around and let Esau kill him. But he's a merciful God. He says, you did this, but you're going to go away, and my will is going to continue to be accomplished. I have something in mind. I'm going to let things happen. But also, you see, where could God have stopped Rebekah from doing this in the first place? He certainly could have miraculously done something to stop Rebekah from doing this. He says, but I think what his issue is, it doesn't matter what you people think is going to happen. You're going to act in these bad actor type of things. What you do, I don't want you to do these things, but remember this. What I say is going to happen is going to happen. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter what Isaac's blessing on either of these guys will. God's will is going to be accomplished. My will is going to be accomplished. And again, they're looking at it from a standpoint of this is what's happening right here and now. They don't see 400 years into the future when all of this is washed away and these people come up out of Egypt and they go and inherit a land. Now, they're just thinking, hey, we're just trying to get from day to day. Let's because this is important. We're going to see here in just a little bit. Look at what Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and Zilpah all do in order to accomplish what they want. Right? I want children. What am I going to do? They just behave in absolutely appalling ways towards one another. And God's saying, look, you guys can do all this, but this is for the here and now. I have something bigger in mind. I have something better in mind. My will is going to be accomplished, and it certainly does. All right, let's continue on. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't think that I would nominate Rebecca for the Mother of the Year award. And
Jacob might,
well,
but
right.
nobody else.
But I can imagine as a parent, as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
choosing between my two sons, my favorite, and then working a plan to bring friction and bring tension between the two of them.
Right.
Why would she not work the opposite and try to bring them closer together than further apart?
Yeah. Again, you're talking about human beings doing human things, which sometimes it baffles us because again we have the advantage of hindsight. What is Rebecca's thinking here? Is my favorite son going to get left behind? Is he not going to receive a good blessing from Isaac? This was for him to do. I mean, how much influence she had over Isaac is we don't know. We're not given to know that. We were talking before everybody got here, and I think that one of the reasons that God allowed Esau's two wives to make their lives bitter was probably in partial payback for this behavior that she did towards her oldest son. She says, "Okay, I'll just get two women that you don't like, and then we're going to live around here, and we're going to make your lives bitter." I'm just saying. I don't think that's actually what happened, but he did some foolish things as well. So, all right, let's continue on. So now he's like, let's go to, we finished up verse 45, and here's this verse, and this may tie back up into this narrative that we just read, okay? So then Rebekah says to Isaac, I loathe my life because of the Hittite women. Excuse me. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Apparently, this was not just a minor irritation for Isaac and Rebekah. This was a major irritation for Isaac and Rebekah. You know, the relationship between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law is oftentimes can be a struggle. I'm very fortunate. I cannot tell you how fortunate I am. My mom loves my wife, and my wife loves my mom. And there are minor things here and there, nothing of any importance. But I talk to people, I talk to friends, and they said my mom, she just does not like my wife. And I think, man, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've never had to be concerned about something like that. So you already have a situation where the relationship may be a little tenuous anyway. So now you've got the regular stuff that goes on top of that, and you've got this idea about these are women of Canaan. These are women they're likely heathen. They're engaged in behavior that may be certainly appalling to Isaac and Rebekah, but Esau that's who he's chosen as his wife. And we see here in just a couple of minutes where he compounds the error. Instead of just being a man and taking control of his household, he compounds the error by doing something else. But here we see, Rebekah, it's interesting is all of this stuff's going on, and now she's going to complain about her own life being miserable because of these daughters-in-law that her son's taken. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for you right at this point. You kind of like, we're asking for it, so to speak. All right, anybody got anything they want to add before we continue to move on? Sorry. Yep. There we go. All right. So Rebekah is shielding Jacob from Esau, is on the pretense of finding him a wife, but I think she sees what's happened with Esau. She says, I don't want this to be the case. So this is a perfect excuse for him to get out of town, number one. He's going to get out of town and not get killed by his brother. Also, we're going to send him back to our family, and he'll find himself a wife there, a nice Jewish woman. No, I'm just kidding. This nice young lady that we know, right? Family's family's always the most important thing. We're going to find somebody that we can trust, from somebody that we can trust, and it'll be a whole lot better than if he sticks around and finds a wife from around here, right? So let's go to chapter 28. So Isaac calls Jacob and he blesses him and he directs him. He gives him an instruction, right? This is an imperative. You must not take a wife of the Canaanite women, right? That's what Abraham said about him. Don't take a wife for my son from the land of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So Jacob's been giving essentially marching orders, literally been given marching orders. He said, God Almighty, now the term God Almighty here is El Shaddai. El Shaddai. It's another name for God. I think I mentioned this in last week's class. El Shaddai means many-breasted one. And you think, well, that's weird. Why? It's referring to a masculine God. The term here is gender neutral. So it doesn't refer to a man or a woman, it's gender neutral. El Shaddai means many-breasted one. This is the idea that God is a fount of blessing. So God is going to bless Jacob on his journey. He's saying, you're going to go. This is what's going to happen. You're going to get there safely. You're going to live there. You're going to find a wife from there. And you're not going to take one from there. God will provide. All right? So God Almighty here is El Shaddai. And I don't think I wrote that, if you need to know. Shaddai. Shaddai. El Shaddai. All right? All right, let's move on. Let's see. We do not see here, however, that Isaac is aware of the threat that Esau has breathed out in regards to Jacob. It could be that we don't want to make the old man unhappy and miserable in his final years. Well, it's several years before he finally does die, but they don't want. Why make the man miserable? So we're going to kind of keep this away from him. We don't see where there's a thing. But again, Rebekah is exercising her prerogative to control things from behind. There's nothing wrong with what she's wanting to do. Maybe the reason she's doing it, there's nothing wrong with what she's doing. Esau's got these 2 wives that make me miserable. Send Jacob away to find one. Send him to our family. So that's what he does. Take a wife from there. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. Is that interesting? So as he's going, we don't see where he is alone as he goes. It's possible that he may have taken a couple of guys with him, some companions on the journey. We're not given to know that. But it would be reasonable to understand that he was probably not by himself. It's dangerous territory. He probably took a couple of guys with him, company. But look what he says: "Be fruitful and multiply, that you may become a company of people." So as he goes by himself, maybe with 2, maybe a couple of other guys, he goes with, let's say he goes with 5 people. Think about as he goes, he's with 5 people. When he comes back, though, who's he accompanied by? A multitude of people. Servants, wives, concubines, children, animals. And he comes back as this big contingent. He goes basically, probably equipped with enough to survive, but he's not going with this big retinue. But he comes back, he says, that you may become a company of peoples. That's exactly how he returns back to his mom and dad. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and your offspring with you. Oh, so what are we talking about here? Look what he says, that you may take possession of the land of the sojournings that God gave to Abraham. So what promise is this one?
Land promise?
Land promise, yes. He says, may God, God, give the blessing of Abraham to you. So it was from Abraham. Isaac received it through Abraham. Now he's praying that Jacob will receive it through himself, that this will be accomplished. It was not necessary for Isaac to do this. He had no power to bestow that blessing. He's saying that, essentially, may he find in you what he found in me, that he would renew this covenant. He would keep that covenant active. So Isaac sends Jacob away. He goes to Padan Aram, to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Jacob, or a brother of Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau's mother. All right. About 500 miles. So I don't know, about 20 days journey. This is just what I found. This is walking at a fairly steady pace, stopping in the evenings to rest, getting up in the morning and continuing to go along. About 20 days journey. That's pretty long. It's a long way away. This is not something you didn't go visit family on the weekends. Okay? Essentially, you were gone, you were in another country. Think about 500 miles. I'm trying to think what would 500 miles accomplish from, let's say Conyers. If you were on I-20, in Conyers and you just started going I-20 and you just headed 500 miles out west, I'm just trying to think of where you would get to.
If you went north, you'd end up in Charleston, West Virginia.
Charleston, West Virginia. Country roads take me home, right?
There you go.
Okay. So 500 miles would take us into West Virginia. Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, that's like I said, that's not a journey that you undertake on a spur of the moment. This is something that hey, and here's the thing. Jacob, as far as he knows now, he's going to get out there and he's not going to come back. He may not see his family again. He wants to. He's praised that he will. But as far as he knows, he may get up there to Padan Aram and never find a way to get back home. God may want to keep him there. His family may want to keep him there, and we see where that's almost the case, right? Laban doesn't want to let him go. He wants him to hang around because he's got both of his daughters and he's got all of his grandchildren. So he's like, I want to keep Jacob around, and he's cheap help. At least he thought he was at the very beginning. It turned out to be very expensive help. But 500 miles, about 20 days. All right, so he's going to go to the house of his grandfather, and he's going to marry one of his cousins, isn't he? There's nothing wrong with this. This is not found to be this is not until the law comes about that this is forbidden right now. God has no problem with it. He's allowing it. All right. So let's go to verse 6, because we said before Esau had married these 2 Hittite women. Now he's about to compound the error. Esau, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I do have, in spite of the fact that Esau was a very foolish young man, or a man, he was a very foolish man, did very foolish things, there is still in me a great deal of sympathy for him. I do feel badly for him. He did something very, very ignorant and very, I'll say the word stupid. That's to my daughters, that's the S word. He did something very stupid. in that he sold his birthright. He despised his birthright so that he sold it. But that was bad, but the deception that cost him the blessing from his father, as well as everything else, because we look at this and we realize that Esau still loved his father, even though the blessing was stolen from him. He still loved his father and sought his father's approval, and we see this here. I feel badly for him. You wonder what his mind was like, what he was laboring through as this happens, and then he sees his brother Isaac being sent to find a wife from somewhere else. Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan-aram to take a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women." He's like, "Hey, I'm married to 2 Canaanite women." And that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan-aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women, the 2 women that he's married to, didn't please Isaac, what does he do? He goes to Ishmael, his uncle, and takes as his wife, besides the wives that he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. All right? So he said, these 2 wives that I have don't please my father, so I'm going to find one that he would be pleased with, maybe. So he goes and takes this other wife. So now he's got 3 wives, and he's only supposed to have 1 in the first place, and none of them are really from the family that Isaac would have been happy with him doing. We're not given to know anything about this. Did Isaac tell him to go and find a wife from this other from his kinsfolk? We don't read where that happened. Is it likely inferred that he would have? He probably warned his son against doing this. Don't do this, and he does it anyway. But we don't know. I don't want to speculate any more than would be necessary to understand the problem that's going on here. All right, there's a big issue that's going on here with Esau and his family. A lot of disconnect, very dysfunctional. Let's just say. So he goes and he gets this other wife, and now he's got 3 wives where he should only have 1. None of them are from his kinsmen. None of them are really going to please his mom and his dad, especially his mom. All right. So there's where we are. Anybody got questions about that so far? All right, let's continue on. So let's look at this. Oh, I got a little map. There we go. Ugh. Not very good. It's not very good contrast. But this is Haran up here. Okay. So he leaves down here and he travels all the way up here, 500 miles. He's there for, we know, at least 14 years, probably much longer than that. And then eventually he makes his way back down, as Isaac said, with a company of people, large group. All right. So Jacob leaves Beersheba and he travels towards Haran. And he comes to a certain place and he stays there that night because the sun is set. He takes one of the stones from the place and he puts it under his head and he lays down in that place to sleep. Not sure why. Takes a stone, but he takes this stone. And he dreamed, and this is the dream of Jacob's ladder, right? Behold, there was a ladder. Notice it doesn't say, most of the pictures you see, it shows a staircase. But that's not what we read. It says a ladder. And even then, a ladder meant a ladder. 2 poles, rungs. So what's happening on this ladder? There's a ladder that's set up on the earth, and the top of it goes where? Up into the heavens. Is this just simply the sky, or is this the idea of it reaches up into which heaven? We got the first heaven, second heaven, and the third heaven. What's the third heaven? That's where the Lord is, right? The third heaven. So we see where it's part of it's on the earth, and the top of it reaches up to heaven. We know this because it says, "Behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it." So they were coming up and they were going down. They were coming up and they were going down. And behold, excuse me, the Lord stood above it. So at the very top, we understand that it is up in heaven. You have angels coming down and going up. At the very top, he sees God. Now, the idea here is, the idea of the Lord is, we've never seen God, have we? No man has ever seen God. So what did Jacob likely see? A representation of God. But he could not comprehend God in his ultimate glory because we can't comprehend God in his ultimate glory. And besides, this is a dream. So he's thinking the same thing that we're thinking. What would God look like to Jacob? I don't know. His brain conjured up some image of God that he would understand that's who that is. We're not saying he saw something that looked like God. He said, "Behold, the Lord." So Jacob understood that this being that he sees at the top of this ladder, he sees this person that is God. All right? Behold, the Lord stood above it and said, "I am the Lord, the God of" who? Abraham your father, and the God of your father, the land on which you lie. Now this is a prophecy, right? the land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. So this is God confirming what that He confirmed to Abraham and He confirmed to Isaac. Now He's confirming to Jacob. What promise is this? This is the
Blood promise. No.
the land promise. Land promise. Blood promise. Okay. Now, he continues on. He says, the land that you're lying on will belong to you. Look at verse 14. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth. So what promise is this one?
Offspring seed.
No?
Nation.
Nation. Now, let's continue on. We're not done. Your nation. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth. So you're going to inherit the land. You're going to have tons of children, descendants that are going to come from you. He says, you shall spread abroad to the west, east, north, and south, and in you, your offspring, shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's the seed promise, right? So we have the land, the nation, and the seed promise all in one vision that Jacob has while he's laying there dreaming with his head using a rock as a pillow. I think he probably had one of his cloaks tucked up underneath him, because I've slept on the ground before and it's not comfortable. So hopefully he had something in between him and that rock. But the rock's important. Let's continue. He says, behold, this is as God said, as Isaac said to him, El Shaddai, all right, bless you, make sure that you're safe. What does he say here? Behold, in verse 15, I am, you're what?
With you.
With you. What does that mean? Does that mean that God's just hitching along for a ride? What does it mean that he says that God, I am with you? This thing that you're being sent upon is part of my purpose, and I will cause it to come about. All right, my portion of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do. I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. All right. So he's essentially assuring him that what? He's not going to die on the journey. Everything. Oh, does it come off yet? Please tell me I didn't. Is it? Oh. Why did my alarm go off? I guess it would help. Well, okay. We're going to stop there. My alarm did not go off. It's supposed to go off and tell us we had time. Let's stop here. All right. We'll come back and we'll pick this back up again. One. Here we go. That was good. All right. We're still in chapter 28, talking about the dream that Jacob has. Just a couple of points if you want to write those down. It was a ladder, not a staircase. That's just one of those pet peeves. I see a staircase. It was not. It was a ladder. It was just one. It wasn't two that were going up. It says he saw a ladder, right? God, one of the points is that an aspect of this is the idea of angels. You know, oftentimes angels are referred to as ministering spirits. So this is the idea that God has constant communication going on. And it's oftentimes, we think that God is only in communication with people that think like us and look like us and talk like us. And God is involved in communication. What He's doing, though, however, is not merely talking with people. He talks with us through His Word. So the idea here is that many people think, well, you know, God and I have an understanding. No, you don't. The understanding that we have is through His Word. I've seen people say, well, you know, I don't do this, but you know what? God and I have God and I have an understanding. Well, unless your understanding is found here, you don't have an understanding with God. But God wants communication between Him and His creation. He desperately wants that. He really wants us to communicate with Him. I would say that if you hold most people, their spiritual aspect of their lives that they probably need to work on, they know they need to work on, is their prayer life. I know it's always been like that for me. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it could always be better. It would be better improved. As I said, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 14, angels is ministering spirit. Number three, God is watching over Jacob. He has him in mind. Is he the only person that he has in mind? Of course not. God is watching over all of creation. He knows everything that's going on. Hard for us to understand sometimes because our situation is the important situation. That's what's going on in my life. So we think, well, you know, God's going to drop everything and just be involved in us. He doesn't have to. All right, there's enough God to go around. Okay? God's watching over Jacob. And the fourth, and I don't know how many people here took the test and got the point right about type and antitype. The latter is a type of Christ. Didn't have to be a human to be a type. Right? Didn't have to be human to be a type. Like the bronze serpent that was raised up in the wilderness, that is a type of Christ. All right? So it's a type and antitype. I'll let you get that. That's all right. No worries. Ladder is a type of Christ. The ladder leads to God and vice versa, right? Jesus leads to God. John 14:6 and John 1 verse 51. All right? So Jacob realizes that he has been in contact with God. Not just God, the God of his father Abraham, God of his father Isaac. Now he's been in contact with him, and he's received the promises that were given to Abraham and Isaac. And I want you to think about this. Let's think about this in terms, and let me see if this is on the other. Okay, yeah. We already talked about this. Got that. I tell you what. You'll find in Scripture oftentimes that someone will be speaking to someone else, and they will say, "Your God, Jehovah, your God." Typically from a younger man to an older man that has that is understood to have a relationship with God. Maybe he has been spoken to personally by God, but this idea that the Lord your God, the Lord your God, the Lord your God. And I've always wondered, I've always thought about this, and I've looked it up, I've done some research. I haven't found anybody that's really done a treatment of this. The idea is that until El Shaddai, until the Lord God, until Jehovah came to Jacob and spoke to him in that dream and acknowledged who he was in that dream, if the God of Abraham and Isaac, not that he wasn't real, but that Jacob felt that he was the God of his father and not necessarily his personal God yet. He didn't understand that relationship. And I've always kind of had a difficulty with people saying I have a personal relationship with God, a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I understand what they mean by that. But what Jacob has not realized yet is that he's had a relationship with God this entire time. He just hasn't been brought into a perfect understanding about that relationship just yet. That yes, that relationship has been there, but now God has revealed himself to Jacob, and now Jacob can rightfully say, my God. Not just my father's God, not just the God that spoke to my father Isaac and my father Abraham. He's my God because I've spoken with him. He's affirmed things to me. He's revealed things to me. I've always been kind of curious about that. Maybe that's a research paper for another time. But I've always found it to be a very interesting thing to think about. Was that understanding? Let's say, for example, he goes to find a wife, and he finds up finding two wives. Right? He has Rachel and he has Leah. Did Rachel and Leah understand the God of Jacob as their God as well? Or was he simply Jacob's God and they received blessings simply because they were attached to Jacob somehow? Same thing with Rebekah, same thing with Sarah. Did they understand that concept that God is everybody's God? I mean, God is everybody's God, whether they want him or not. He's their God. He's going to he has ultimate authority, and he will judge them. Even though they haven't accepted him as that aspect. I don't know. I just always found that to be kind of an interesting thing. But at this point, God, the Lord Jehovah, reveals himself to Jacob as the God of his fathers, and he's Jacob's God too. And Jacob receives these promises from Jehovah. All right. So let's look at this. He affirms the nation promise and the seed promise. And look what he says. He said, verse 15. Look at these. These are emphasis mine, so to speak. But look what he says. I am with you. I will keep you. I will bring you. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. So who's the emphasis on this statement? God. God's making himself abundantly clear. Now, when we look at this as New Testament Christians, do we see this same promise for us today? 100%, absolutely. Is our situation a little bit different than Jacob's? Of course it is. But in our lifetimes, what has God said? When you come near to me, when you draw near to me, I will be your God. And look what he says. I am with you. I will keep you. I will bring you. I will not leave you. and until I've done what I promised. All of these things apply to God in our relationship with Him today. The thing about it is, we come to Him through Christ. Jacob wasn't coming to Him through Christ, but he does encounter. We'll get into that in just a couple of minutes. That's a little way down the road. Anybody got anything they want to add to that? Anybody got anything they want to... All right, let's continue on. So what happens? He says, this kind of refers back to 17. He was afraid. He said, how awesome is this place? Why was it awesome? It wasn't awesome simply because of the landscape, right? It's dirt, it's rocks, it's brush, it's all of these... he's traveling through the wilderness to get to Padan Aram. So it wasn't awesome because of the landscaping. It was awesome because what does it say? This is none other than the... What does it say in verse 17? The house of God. Now we understand the house of God as what? In terms of the Old Testament, what do we understand the house of God? We understand the temple, right? The tabernacle. That's the house of God. What Jacob understands is that this is where God is at that particular point in time. And wherever God is holy. It belongs to Him. It says this is the house of God and this is the gate of heaven. Makes perfect sense in the context of the dream he just had. Here's this ladder, and he's thinking in his mind, if I want to go to heaven, I climb that ladder. It takes me right up there. That's why it's a type of Christ, isn't it? That's how you get to heaven, is through Christ. Climb that ladder. All right. So what does it say? Early in the morning, I'll tell you what, I want to do, that idea that, you see this word down here, Bethel, a stone that houses a god. That is a pagan belief, but it was also it was very much understood in the Semitic people of that time. So we'll get into that. Jacob takes this stone that he laid his head on, he puts it up, he sets it up for a pillar, so it was likely maybe more of a long stone. He puts it up on its edge, and he sets it up as a pillar. Now we got to be careful that we don't look at this as some sort of a pagan thing. That's not how he refers to it. He understands that this is representative of the God of the universe, the God that revealed Himself to him. He sets it up on his edge as a pillar, and he pours oil. He anoints it with oil. He calls the name of that place Bethel, which is house of God. This is where the idea of this Bethel, this is a stone that houses a God. He said this is the very house of God. God dwells in this place. And he certainly did for the time that Jacob was standing there. He was having that dream. He certainly did. He calls it Bethel, but the name of the city at first was Luz. Jacob makes this vow. Now, look at his vow. Look at his vow. He says, if, see, that's a dangerous word to start, right? If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go and will give me bread. So it kind of mirrors the promise that God made him in the dream, isn't it? He says, I will go with you, I will keep you, I will receive you, I promise you this kind of thing. If He will be with me, and He will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I return, as He promised, He says He's going to, then the Lord shall be my God. Now, he makes a simple vow, but it also shows that Jacob's understanding of God and his relationship with God and his faith in God is still conditional. Still conditional. God's promise to him was unconditional. He says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to accomplish. Why is that? Why was God's promise to Jacob unconditional? Because God's looking down the road, isn't He? He's looking way on down the road. He says, I've made a promise, and part of that promise is making sure that you get back with the people that you're going to come back with, so that, what? My will is accomplished in the future. No matter what else you do, I've made a promise, and I'm going to make sure that that promise is kept. Because I'm God. I'm not slack concerning my promises. And some count slackness. What I say I'm going to do, I'm going to do. And we see where Jacob fumbles badly on several instances, but God still says, I'm going to cause this to be accomplished because I have a bigger picture in mind than even you have. You're looking at it and goes, man, I've got 4 wives and I've got 11 kids or 12. I don't want to shortchange the ladies. We had 9, so he has 12 kids. Even Benjamin was not born yet. He says, I'm going to make sure that all of this is accomplished, even if you bungle things very badly, and he does quite a few times. So he makes a simple vow, but his is conditional, where God's was absolute. All right, and then he does something interesting. He offers him a tithe. Look, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. This is the idea of the tithe. We see where God later on codifies this, right? Not in everything, but there are going to be certain offerings where a tenth is going to be required. It's something that's going to be 100%. You have to do this. All right. And this kind of, I wrote this down and I kind of jumped ahead of it. Does Jacob consider Jehovah to be just Isaac's God until he makes himself known to Jacob? I don't know. That's something, interesting thought. All right. So let's move on. Chapter 29. Jacob comes to Haran, his ancestral homeland, right? It's where everybody came from originally, even his grandfather Abraham. He encountered shepherds who know Laban, because he walks in, he sees all these shepherds, and he says, "Do you know the man Laban?" It's interesting, they said, "We do." They don't say, "Oh yeah, man, Laban, he's a great guy, and he's 100%, you can trust him," because we realize that Jacob did not need to trust Laban. Laban was a deceitful man. But you know what? Jacob kind of is getting what's coming to him, right? The deceiver is going to be deceived. So he goes in and he says, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." He said, "Hey, conveniently enough, that's exactly where I need to find. Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" They said, "We know him." He said, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. Here's Rachel, his daughter. She's coming up with her sheep." So he said, we'll skip a little bit of this. Well, verse 9, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So an act of kindness for these young shepherds and his soon-to-be wife. So Jacob kisses Rachel, and we've allowed that. Understand, this is not a romantic kiss. This is a formal kiss, likely on both cheeks. It's just sort of a greeting, formal greeting. He didn't grab her and start kissing her because I know you knew that was going to be his wife. That's not what happened. That would have been interesting. What an introduction. All right, so Jacob tells Rachel that he was her father's kinsman. And that was absolutely part of the norms of the time. You wanted people to know who you were. He's not just some wandering stranger. He is a kinsman. Being a kinsman entitled you to certain things, right? You were under the, what? What was it we talked about? The rules of hospitality, right? When you showed up and you were a kinsman, there were certain rules of hospitality, which means that you were received, you were fed, if you had animals, they were watered, they took care of you, they were responsible for you, essentially. So once he's introduced himself and they know who he is, Laban is under a certain responsibility towards this man, Jacob. So he establishes this familial connection. So from this point on, actually the next two chapters are like, there's a lot of narrative there's packed in there. Very spare, gets the point across very quickly. Not a lot of time for sentimentality or emotionalism. It's just simply a recounting of what's going on. So what happens? And let's go ahead and go to verse 15. Laban says to Jacob, "Because you're my kinsman, why should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages are going to be." Now, I like to think that Laban is already trying to calculate how he can get some free work out of Jacob. Just because it seems to be within the scope of his character. So tell me what shall your wages be. Now Laban had two daughters, right? And the name of the older one was Leah. The name of the younger one was Rachel. Look at verse 17. Look at verse 17. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. I want to make sure that we understand. When it says that Leah's eyes were weak, this is an idiom, and essentially means... trying to be polite, trying to be nice. It hurt you to look at Leah. She was not an attractive woman. That's what that means. A lot of times it says her eyes were soft. It does not mean that she had beautiful brown eyes that she kind of got lost in. Because look at the juxtaposition here. It says her eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful. So it kind of gives you a better understanding. I don't mean to be ugly, but there's somebody for everybody. I've seen people that you think, I'm sorry, but that person is never going to find somebody, and man, they all of a sudden next time you look, they're happily married. And that's awesome. I think that's fantastic. There is usually somebody for everybody. All right? So Leah is an unattractive young woman, but Rachel is a beautiful young woman. So do you think there was already a little bit of friction between Rachel and Leah? Probably. Then you've got two sisters. I don't know what the age difference was. They could have been like, Jacob and Esau. They could have been twins. We don't know. But we do know that there was a big difference between the two of them. And so the first one that Jacob sees happens to be Rachel. He's like, man, all right. You know, she's related to Laban. This is where I'm supposed to come and get a wife. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, he was probably introduced to her sister, and he's like, you know, nice to meet you, but this is the one I'm really focusing on right here. All right? So Rachel was beautiful, Leah not so much. And look what he says. Verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. Now, that idea of love, it could encompass both romantic and the idea that this was somebody that was not only beautiful in appearance, but that her demeanor was also something that Jacob was attracted to. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I think if he knew how she was, if she gave full evidence of her character at the first, he may not have been so quick to marry her. But at this point, there's an attraction going on. All right, he says, "I will serve you 7 years." So Laban's got a deal here. I'll serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And this is, I understand that Rachel could have said no to this, but apparently Rachel had no problem with the deal either. So she agrees to it, they agree to it, Laban agrees to it, so they cut a covenant. There's an understanding. I'll work for 7 years for you for the hand of your daughter Rachel. Laban says, better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man, which makes sense. He's a kinsman, right? It's better I give you stay with me. So they agreed to this agreement, so to speak. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. Now there's a couple of different understandings. One is that Rachel was given to him immediately with the understanding that he would serve another 7 years. I don't believe that. I believe that at this point, Laban's like, you know, if I just give her, and at any time he could skedaddle and take my daughter, and then I'm out everything. So I'm going to make him work the 7 years, and he worked 7 years, and then Rachel was given to him. Well, he thought. So in verse 21, then Jacob says to Laban, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is complete." In other words, it's, you know, I've served my 7 years. It's time for you to give her up as for my wife, and you know the whole marriage and everything like that. So Laban gathers together people and they make a feast. In the evening, he takes his daughter Leah and brings her to Jacob, and he went into her. There's a lot of subterfuge there, and I have not figured out yet exactly how that all would occur. They were able to fool Isaac with a goat skin on his neck and some clothes on him. So apparently Jacob was taken in by a ruse as well. Not sure how they accomplished it. Now one thing, back then they didn't have street lights. They didn't have that. You know, you went into the tent and the lights were out. The lights are out. Okay. So again, I don't know how they accomplished that, but they were able to. All right. They fooled Jacob. So he goes in the evening. He takes his daughter Leah, brings her to Jacob, and he went into her. All right. Laban gave him. Verse 25. And in the morning, behold. I love it. They even have the exclamation point at the end. It says, "And in the morning, behold, it was Leah." It's like, can you believe this? Can you imagine the consternation? You know, at first it's probably not just confusing, but almost alarming. What have I done? Did I go into the wrong tent? You know, what happened? You know, how long was I asleep? How did all this get accomplished? Okay. So, and Jacob says to Laban, understandably, he's probably panicking. What in the world did I do or didn't do? Or he doesn't know. So he goes out and he says, "What is this thing you've done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel?" Now, this could be simply a matter of, that was our understanding, right? It could be anger. You know, look, this is wrong. What did you do to me? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban says, "It's not so done in our country to give to the younger before the firstborn." There are civilizations, there are even countries today where it's frowned upon for the younger child, the younger daughter, especially the younger daughter, to get married before the older daughter. I cannot find anywhere where this has been written down in any kind of law. Even the people of the time when this was written, there's no sign that this was any kind of a law. It may have just been a cultural mores. It was just not done. It wouldn't be fair to the older daughter if the younger daughter gets married first. It was trying to keep the peace. There was a movie I watched a long time ago, like early 90s, where the younger daughter actually was required to stay unmarried and live with the mom so that mom wouldn't be lonely up until the point that she dies. So there's all kinds of weird cultural things that go on throughout the world. But no one's been able to find this written in any kind of real law. But he says it's not done so here. And at this point, knowing what we know that's going to happen in the future, and knowing what Laban did, it's kind of, I think we have a reason to kind of cast some aspersions on what Laban is saying. I think he was simply trying to deceive. I don't think there was anything like that written down anywhere. This was a chance for Laban to marry off his unattractive older daughter and establish her with a husband. Sad, but it's true. All right? Complete the week of this one. The idea of the week here is basically a honeymoon period. There was a week of time where the husband and the wife, they were not responsible for anything. They didn't have to go work. If they had anything to do, it was done by servants. It was done by family members. They didn't even have to cook. They hung around the tent, got to know one another. Family would bring food. They would eat food. Everything was done for them so that they could spend that week being not just being intimate, but understanding and getting to know one another. Because that really wasn't something that happened a whole lot. There wasn't a dating thing. You didn't go out by yourself to the drive-in on a camel and get to know one another, look at each other's eyes. You didn't do that kind of thing. So this is a chance for them to get to know one another, talk and become more intimate with one another, so to speak. He says, complete the week of this one. It even bothers me the way that he says this. Complete the week of this one. Not complete the week of my beloved older daughter, Leah. He is almost dismissive of her. It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading something into it that's not there. I don't know. Complete the week of this one and we will give you the other. Man, just the mindset. We'll give you the other one in return for severing me another 7 years. All right. Is it possible that Laban had a favorite as well? And maybe Jacob is reaping the consequences of another parent having a favorite? I don't know. Yeah.
The fact is, it does happen. Growing up in Mexico, it does happen. I had 6 sisters, and that was expected. So
Okay.
I think for me, the only way to look at it is that he was being deceptive. He wanted the free labor,
Okay.
and there's nothing more than that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Laban, in comparison to where he was when they came and got Rebekah for Isaac, it's almost like he's changed somewhat. Because then he seemed to be a fairly honorable man. He even said, listen, do you want to go with this man? And if she had said no, then they would not have forced her to do it. They may have tried to gently persuade her to go, but Laban makes it very clear, do you want to go with this man? She says, I'll go with him. So they sent him with presents and made a big deal out of it and everything like that. And it seems like Laban, for whatever reason, Laban's demeanor from that point to this point, it looks like his personality almost has changed. Laban is set out from the very beginning as a man who is deceitful.
Or the real him finally came out.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that was a ruse at the beginning, and now it could be, hey, they regretted letting Rebekah go, and now when yet another young man comes up from Beersheba to get a wife, okay, now's our chance to get one over. All right, and that could very well be it. I don't know. So he says, it's not done so. Complete the week of this one. We'll give you the other one. So Jacob did that. He completed the week. And then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Now, the way I understand this is that he worked 7 years. He was deceitfully given Leah to be his wife. What I understand is after that week of honeymoon was over, Rachel was given to him then, and he would work the 7 years. I don't believe that he had to work another 7 years and then get married to Rachel. That's my understanding. There's nothing in here one way or the other. That's just the way I understand it. I've got the one married that I was worried about. This is not a problem now. He stuck around for 7 years. For the one that he didn't bargain for, he's definitely going to stick around another 7 years for the one that he really wanted. That's the way I'm looking at it. So Jacob does so, completed her week. All right. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So we also see here Bilhah and Zilpah, right? The 2 handmaids that are going to bear part of the 12 tribes. Let's see. All right. How willing were the 2 daughters to go along with Laban's plan? That's just sort of like a rhetorical question. I'm always interested in comments. How willing were these 2 daughters? They both had to be involved in this somehow, right? They both of them had to at least give, if it's not tacit, maybe tacit permission, if not active permission, to go through with this ruse. You know, what was Rachel? I mean, Rachel understood that she was going to be the one that was going to be his wife. Did Laban come to her and say, look, you know, don't you feel sorry? Don't you love your sister? Don't you want her to be happy too? You know, this is our chance, and you could both have this young man. He looks like he's going to be he's a fine upstate. He's part of our kinsman. This is a chance. I don't know. There's a lot of, if you read on this, there's a lot of supposition in regards to this. There's no evidence that his assertion about his daughters, one having to be married before the other, was true. Were Rachel and Leah as deceptive as Laban? Did they take part of their father's character? Did they internalize part of his character, and they also be that kind of deception, or that kind of as deceptive as Laban was? I don't know. Have to at least a little bit. I mean, surely he didn't handcuff Rachel and keep her from going into that tent, right? Leah had to be a part of this as well, and I feel badly for Leah as well. I mean, you know, she wasn't part of this bargain, but now she's the wife of this man who doesn't really love her. He doesn't. He accepts her, but he doesn't really love her, because it says that, you know, the Bible. And we're going to give the word idea hating in just a couple minutes. Yeah.
But Laban, as the patriarch, right?
Yes.
I mean, women had no rights. They really had no. I mean, if a woman was off on her own, she had no property. She had nothing.
Yeah.
So a lot of
it was difficult.
A lot of their life was, you know, you do this.
Yeah.
And you know, they had to be with. You know, they had to get married in order to have security for their life. So.
You know, and you wonder what it was like. What was like before Jacob came along. I mean, had he I hate to use the terminology, but has he been trying to find Leah a husband for a number of years, and just nothing ever worked out. They for whatever reason they rejected her. I mean, it was difficult, and you know that Laban, this was a big concern for him. He wanted to make sure that his daughters are taken care of. It's entirely probable that the rest of the people that lived in the area, he didn't want her to go to any of those guys. Mm-hmm. So here's this great opportunity, young blood. He knows the family. This is a perfect opportunity to get both of his daughters married to a guy with some promise, right? Understanding who he was. But yeah, they didn't have a whole lot of. Trying to think of the right word.
Say.
What's that?
Say.
Yeah, they didn't have a whole lot to say. That's probably the easiest way to say it. They were just sort of went along with what was presented to them as the best option. Don't know. All right, but we have to look at this. What about Rachel's theft of Laban's household gods? Okay, so you know there was a character flaw there, at least in that regard. She stole something from her father, and it could be the fact that her father was just not a very good man. He put on a good face when they came for Isaac, or they came for Rebecca, but he just wasn't a very good person. But here's the interesting thing: the deceiver has been deceived. All right, he got his blessing through subterfuge and a lie, and now he's been deceived. So it's a little bit of, I'm not using the word karma. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't believe in that nonsense. But it is. What does he say? What as you sow, that's a biblical concept. As you sow, so shall you reap. So God's allowing a little bit of payback to Jacob for some of the things he's done in the past. Now you've got to ask yourself this: how much guilt does Jacob feel now? He could have just simply said, "Oh, woe is me," or is he thinking, "Man, now I know how Esau felt. Really feel bad about that." I like to think he did. Maybe he did. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. All right. So Jacob goes into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. And this gets into the idea of hating. Okay, we talked about Esau. Did Esau hate Jacob? Yes. Did he hate him in the sense that we understand hatred? Yeah, he hated him. He was going to kill him, as a matter of fact. But here we see that he loved Rachel more than Leah. So at least in that week, when they got to know one another, there was at least a relationship that was forged there. He understood that this was his wife, and he had an obligation to her, even if that physicality love wasn't there, that he still saw her as a human being, a valuable human being, not financially, but just she was a person. She was a person made in the image of God. And she probably bared her soul to him, and he bared his soul to her, and there was a relationship that was forged. But he did love Rachel more than he loved Leah. And that's the idea of favoritism keeps coming back, doesn't it? Over and over and over and over again. All right? So, let's look and see. All right? So, let's see. In verse 31, because this gets into this. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb. So she was not hated in the sense that we understand it. She was loved less. She was probably considered, Jacob probably lived in a tent with Rachel. Leah had her own. So she lived probably by herself. You're not going to get two wives in a tent together. That's just a recipe for disaster. I have two adult teenage or adult daughters, and they're good kids. And my wife is awesome. But you better believe there's conflict in that house. So I have to come in sometimes and say, all right, everybody in your separate quarters, leave it alone. So you can imagine what this is like. You know, what was Leah told and Rachel told? All of this is boiling over. So it's probable that Jacob lived with Rachel because he loved her more. Leah had her own tent with her handmaid. So there's already friction likely brewing between these two, compounded on what it was before Jacob ever entered into the picture. All right? So what does he do? Lord sees Leah, right? This is the idea of a merciful, loving God. He sees Leah, and he has what for her? What's that?
Compassion.
Compassion. He looks at her and he says, this is a woman, look, Jacob's living with Rachel, and he never visits Leah. She's over there in this tent by herself. So what does he do? He opens her womb. He says, okay, this is how I'm going to balance the scales a little bit. All right? So as you know, that the desire of both of these women is to do what for Jacob? Give him what? Children. Absolutely important. The idea of the quiverful. He wants that was the absolute thing. And that's how many women saw their role. Not only as being a wife, but being a mother to the children of the man that they're married to. That was part of it. In some ways, that's still a lot of the idea how women view their relationship. It's like, not only am I a wife to this man, but I'm also a mother to his children. This is absolutely important back in. If you didn't have kids, it was difficult. All right, so he opens up Leah's womb, and he allows her to have children. She conceives, and she bears a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. So the idea of Reuben, one of the translations says, see a son. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. Number one, it could be, she holds up that baby and says, see a son. Or, and I find this kind of an interesting take on it, she sees Rachel and she holds up that child and says, see a son. Kind of changes things, doesn't it? These are two women that are in conflict with one another. See a son. Oh, and guess what? Every time Rachel refers to him, she's saying that word over, and then she's saying that over and over again. See a son, see a son, see a son. So every time she acknowledges Reuben, I wonder how many times she said his name. It's like that boy over there, right? All right. So she gives birth to Reuben, see a son. Simeon, God heard. I asked for another son. He's given me another son. And it could be also, see, God heard. La 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 la. So one more taunt from Rachel or from Leah towards Rachel. I'm not saying that's exactly the way it is, but I can certainly see it in the context of these two women that are having conflict with one another. All right. Then you have, of course, she has Levi, which the name means attached, and the name Judah, which means praise. Now it's interesting. Who's the firstborn? Firstborn is Reuben, but who has the preeminence when Jacob gives out the blessings?
Joseph.
All right. Joseph gets the birthright. He's the one that has the preeminence. Why? Because Reuben does what? Sleeps with his father's concubine. And then Judah, you would think, okay, Judah. Now it's interesting that he does not give Judah the preeminence, but Judah is the one through whom the Christ comes, right? We understand that. He doesn't regard Judah because of the situation with who? Tamar. All right? We'll get to that in just a little bit. All right? So God sort of balances things out for Leah. He has compassion on her. He opens up her womb. She gives birth to 4 babies, all male children. Now, whether we like it or not, that was a major sign. That really lifted her up in the eyes of everybody that knew her. Look at that. Look at this wife. Man, she gets 4 male children before Rachel ever even has one. I imagine she probably, maybe, a little bit, kind of flaunted that. It's hard to blame her, honestly. All right? So things take a turn for the worse. So let's look at, let's continue on to the next chapter. Here's where things go off the rails. Well, they've already gone off the rails with 2 wives, Jacob having these 2 wives. That was not supposed to happen like that. It was wrong for that to occur. But there it is. So when Rachel saw that when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. Yeah, I can imagine that. She says to Jacob, "Give me children or what? I shall die." A little bit of hyperbole there, isn't it? Was she going to die if she didn't have children? No. Remember, God's plan is going to be accomplished even if she doesn't think it is. Even if she's impatient for the way it's going to turn out, God's plan is still going to be accomplished. Sometimes we wait for something and we're ignorant of it. We don't know what God's doing. And so what do we want to do? As Rachel does. We're going to help it along, aren't we? So she said, "Give me children or I shall die." Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel and said, "If I am the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? I'm not responsible for this. Obviously everything's working because you're God." I wonder how that conversation went. Obviously everything's working. Leah had kids. Okay. Your sister had children. How am I responsible for this? It's God. It must be God's, God's work. She said, "Here's my servant Bilhah. Go into her so that she may give birth on my behalf." That worked so well the last time it was tried, didn't it? So that even I may have children through her. This is the idea that her servant was not considered she was not family. At this point, she is a womb. And that's sad, that anybody would treat somebody else like that. It's not to be done. So go into her, right? Go into her as a husband does to a wife, that I may have children through her. So she gave him her servant Bilhah. Jacob goes into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Now here's the problem. That son, even if she had never had children, is that son going to quench that desire for Rachel to have children? No, it doesn't. She thinks it is. In her mind, if I could just have a son, even if it's through my servant, it'll be mine. It's not, though. It's not. You're still not the mother of that child. And now what you've done is, as Sarah did, she sold her marriage bed. She sold it. So Bilhah conceives and bears Jacob a son. Jacob says, "God has judged me and has also heard my voice and given me a son," but that wasn't the end of it. Therefore she called his name Dan. Dan meaning judged. God has judged me. All right. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Called his name Naphtali, which means wrestlings. All right. There's some serious misunderstandings on Rachel's part, isn't there? She thought she understood. And it's really, she's thinking about things, and while we may have sympathy for her, but it is a very selfish, she's thinking selfishly. It's about, I'm going to die if I don't have children. Well, that means that you want to have children, not that you want to have children through your husband and some other woman that he's not married to. The whole situation makes no good sense. All right? So God's not done yet, right? Verse 9, when Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. So it's like there's this brinkmanship, right? The arms race, just with children. Right? You have kids, well, I'll have more. And then you'll have kids, and then we'll have one more. And then it's like they're at war with one another. Now here's the thing. What does this say about Jacob? What does it say about Jacob? Jacob is what at this point? He is weak. He is a weak man. At any point, he needed to come into this situation. At the very beginning, he needed to come into this situation and say, "This ends now. This is ridiculous." I think maybe he'd be thinking like a lot of guys. There's 4 women, and they all want part of me. They want children through me, and I'm the only one that can do this thing. Again, this is a man who is not being wise at all. And as we were speaking during the break. The interesting thing about this is the conflict between between all of these men who would grow to be tribes that bear their name. they had not 1 second of real cohesive unity until God brought them up out of Egypt and set them and brought them in with a common purpose, which was to drive out the nations that inhabited Canaan. And even then, you had 2 spies that said, hey, we need to go ahead and do this. God's giving it to us. And the rest of them said, no, we don't need to do this. So they couldn't even come to a consensus on that. And it wasn't until Saul began to unite the tribes, and then David really united them under one banner, that all of these tribes began to kind of coalesce and become the nation that really God had in mind for them. All right, so let's see. Leah, she bears Gad, which means good fortune, and a second son, Asher, which means happy. All right. You notice that Leah considers these, she claims them as her own. So these women are just, they're pawns in a very weird, twisted game. That's all there is to it. All right. So I want you to think about this. Consider the attitudes, these women's attitudes towards one another, towards Jacob, and towards their servants. They were not thinking the way that they needed to think, which kind of gives rise to the idea about who was their parent, who was their mom, who was their dad. Did Laban's attitudes and did his morality spill over into his daughters' lives? It would appear so. All right. Verse 14. This is a mandrake. Has anybody ever seen a mandrake before? It's kind of a weird thing. You notice that there were some pictures, I could not get them to download. There are some pictures where if you look at a mandrake, it very much looks like a human being. And they're grown, they're found in nature, that you can grow them yourself. But the roots oftentimes form these clusters that look like human beings. Very strange. Okay? But look what he says. In the days of wheat, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. We think, well, what's the big deal with the mandrake? Well, number one, these were people they had an understanding, a working knowledge of Jehovah. It doesn't mean, however, that he was the one that they predominantly worshipped. So when you talk about Laban had household gods, there's no doubt that they certainly had an understanding of there were gods of fertility. There were certain rites that you would do. If you wanted this to be accomplished, you would do this. Mandrakes were one of those things that were often used. I think even now they're used for people who engage in what we understand to be witchcraft, Wiccan society, that kind of thing. They use them in potions and spells and all of this kind of stuff. The roots, the leaves, all of this kind of stuff, they're used for that sort of thing. So it tells me that even in antiquity, there was superstitious belief in all kinds of stuff. All right. So he says, "Give me some of your mandrakes." And look what he says: "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" Look what Rachel does. She says, "Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." Now, right off the bat, we got a real problem with this. So she's selling her husband for these mandrakes, these things that maybe she's using them in some sort of weird heathen practice. I'm not sure exactly what it might be. So in verse 16, when Jacob comes in from the field in the evening with the sheep and the goats, Leah goes out to meet him and says, "You must come in to me, for I have" what? Hired you with my son's mandrakes. So, not to be indelicate, but at this point, Jacob is a gigolo. He's for hire. What? Truthfully, if you wrote this down in some sort of an hour-long drama format, this would sell immediately. Immediately, somebody's going to want to take this and say, and it goes to show that people criticize the Bible in the past. Well, the people back then acted wickedly. Yes, I think that's the point. God doesn't withhold this from us. He doesn't say, "Oh, my servants were perfect; they never did anything wrong." He said, Look at what they've done. This is an object lesson to you. This is what you're not to do." He makes it abundantly clear. This is the consequences of these people's actions. Don't do these kind of things. All right. So with the mandrake, Leah hires Jacob from Rachel. So it infers a few things. Number one, as we said earlier, Jacob lives with Rachel and likely, very rarely went into Leah as a wife. She was neglected. And we know, as we said earlier, Jacob was not a wise man or a strong husband. He was easily led. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would be, as a man, I would be offended if my wife did something like that. I would, just off of principle, I'd be like, no way. Even if I thought about it, I'm not going to do it because I'm essentially, I'm a hired servant in my own household. Right? But Jacob is not, at this point, is not a very wise man. He's very easily led. So what happens though? Okay, he goes into Leah. Leah is again pregnant by Jacob. She bears Issachar and Zebulun. And she also gives Jacob the only recorded daughter, which is Dinah. So, like I said, just terrible. As my grandfather used to say, terrible. It's terrible behavior. All right, in verse 22, the long-awaited arrival of the only son at this particular point, because Benjamin's going to come later, the recorded first child from Rachel, right? God remembers Rachel. Not the idea that she disappeared from his viewpoint, but it's the idea that now is the time. The time is now accomplished for her to do what I've set out for her to do. Okay? He listens to her and he opens up her womb. She conceives and bears a son, and he says, God has taken away my reproach. This shows how internalized this attitude was towards her not having children. You know, she knows that as she walks through the encampment that people are looking at her and saying, you know, what kind of wife hasn't given her son, her husband children yet? Well, you know, he had sons by, yeah, but that doesn't count. So even if she considered them her children, nobody else did. She says, he's taken away my reproach. And she calls his name Joseph, saying, may the Lord add to me another son. It's like, I've gotten one, may the Lord give me another son. So she's looking for another one. And he does. He remembers, gives her, ends up giving her Benjamin. All right. We've got a few minutes. We can get through a little bit of this. Like I said, there's a lot of narrative in these last 2 or 3 chapters. It's just a lot. We could probably move fairly quickly. I'm just not going to elaborate on a lot of this. All right? Let's go to verse 25. Jacob agrees. He makes a covenant with Laban. He says, send me away that I may go to my own country. It's time. I have children. I have wives. I have flocks. I have herds. I've got all of this stuff. I'm ready to go back. I've been with you all of these many years. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you. For you know the service that I've given you. He says, whoa, just real quick. Laban says to him, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. It's interesting. He acknowledges God's favor to Jacob, and he realizes that tangentially, Laban has been blessed by Jacob being there with him. And that kind of goes back to the promise. He said, I'm going to send you to this place, and I'm going to make sure that you're blessed, and then I'm going to take you back home again. He says, Jacob says to him, you yourself, or he says, name your wages and I will give it. Now, again, Laban is trying to keep Jacob around as long as he possibly can. He doesn't realize that everything that he has is about to belong to Jacob because of his behavior. Name your wages and I will give it. Jacob says, you yourself know how I have served you, how your livestock is fared. He said, verse 31, what shall I give you? What shall I give you? Jacob said, you won't give me anything. That kind of goes back to Abraham, right? He didn't take anything from the king of Sodom. He says, I don't want anybody to think that you made me wealthy. Who made Abraham wealthy? God made Abraham wealthy. Jacob's essentially saying the same thing. I don't want anything given to me. I'm going to be blessed, and it's going to happen this particular way. He says, you yourself know how I've served you. You fared well. You had little before I came, and it's increased abundantly. The Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. He said, what shall I give you? You shall not give me anything. If you will do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all of your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled from among the goats, and they shall be my wages. So in other words, all in this idea that it's not that there's anything wrong with the spotted and speckled one, but they were the minority. He says, I'll take the ones that are spotted and speckled, the black. He said, you keep the ones that are solid color. Those will be yours, and I'll take the lesser. I mean, that'll be my wage. He says, but that day, or Laban says, good, let it be done, as you have said. But that day Laban removed all of those, gave them to his sons. They took them away, and he leaves Jacob with what? Nothing. He has essentially nothing. Everything that was supposed to go to him is now gone. So then what does he do? He says, all right, now so that you don't come and get any of these things, so that I make sure that you remain essentially with nothing and you have to work for me even longer, he puts 3 days' journey in between himself and Jacob. So that kind of comes back to bite him in just a little bit though. All right. So what happens then? Jacob takes fresh sticks of poplar and almond and all this kind of stuff. He carves the white stripes in them. There's no real inherent ability of these branches with the stripes in them. It has nothing to do with any of this. But what it does is it kind of shows the power. It shows what God's going to do, how it's able to happen. So Jacob agrees for these animals. So Laban removes those and gives them to his sons. So what happens? God allows the solid colored goats and the white sheep to produce spotted speckled goats and black lambs. Not typically, that's not normal. But that's what God allows. Then, to add insult to injury, he allows those animals that would come to him to be stronger and more robust, and the weaker ones will end up with Laban. Kind of an interesting way of going about it. There's a lot written about it. If you want to, I had to sit there and kind of sketch this out, how this was going to be accomplished, because when I read it, I really couldn't understand exactly what was going on. So I wrote out every line for line, to kind of figure out what this plan really was, because it didn't make a whole lot of sense at the first reading. I think that's why a lot of people skip over this part and say, hey, he just got a bunch of stuff and then he left. All right? Which may not be a bad way to go about it. It's not essential that we know how he did it, but we know that God was responsible for this thing occurring. All right? So, in chapter 31, Jacob hears rumblings from his brothers-in-law. That's not good. He hears these people complaining. Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. So there's rumblings from his brothers-in-law, which typically would likely come from Laban himself. Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. I wonder why. He thought he was going to get one over on Jacob, and Jacob's managed to take almost everything that he's got. All these types of animals, and they're stronger and better. So he says, look at what happens in verse 3. The Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your kindred, and what? I will be with you. Again, God's purpose is going to be accomplished. No matter what happened while Jacob was living in that land, God was going to make sure that he was taken care of and that he would go back home again. That was always the promise. God fulfills the promise. All right, so they decide it's time to skedaddle. He explains to his wives why they're leaving. Look at, and you can read all of this. See, your father doesn't regard me with favor, so forth and so on. He kind of details this reason, this list of reasons why they are going to leave. He exposes Laban's cheating. Whether they knew about this or not, I doubt very seriously he was suffering in silence. This is probably something he complained about all the time. But he makes it abundantly clear. This is why we're leaving. This, and this. Has nothing to do with anybody else. Has to do with these reasons. And if we stick around for very much longer, who knows what else is going to happen. All right? They don't seem very loyal to Dad, do they? Rachel and Leah don't seem like they're really loyal. No, don't take us away from Dad. They're like, what God tells you to do, do. All right? They're not really loyal to Laban. He invokes God as the impetus for why they're leaving. God said to do this. It's not his idea, it is God's idea, and they accept it. All right? And as we said, God makes it very clear that he is with Jacob and that it's time to go back home. So what do? They pack up and they do what? They head out. There's no long goodbyes. They don't even let Laban know that they're going. They just pack up. And this is not something that happened overnight. This is something they decided, they planned, and they said, we're going to go. So they gathered everything together. They have to be very careful. Even though he's 3 days away, you don't know when somebody might be coming from Laban to check on things, and they're going to take back this report. Hey, they've rounded up everything. They've broken down all the tents. It looks like they're heading out. So you got to be very careful that Laban doesn't find out. They want to get out of there, right? So they leave without even saying goodbye. It doesn't appear that there's any real love lost between these two groups of people. Laban and the rest of the family, and Jacob and his 2 wives, 2 concubines, and 12 children. All right? All right, we're done. Sorry. We'll have to pick back up next week. Or I will get this up. I will record for next week. I'll probably record either Tuesday or